Story 1. I delivered food for DoorDash back then. It was my main job, so I tried to work at least 8 or 9 hours every single day. To be honest, I was terrible at sticking to any kind of schedule. Each day, I would put off starting work until it got later and later. Sometimes I wouldn't even begin until 9 or 10 at night. This particular evening was one of those nights. I had been working for 3 hours when an order popped up around 1 in the morning. Someone wanted me to pick up groceries from a gas station convenience store nearby. I pulled up to the empty station and walked inside. The place was silent, except for one cashier behind the counter. Back in my car, I double-checked the order to make sure everything was correct. Just one big cheap bottle of wine. Strange order for sure, but it also made my job harder. I always liked just driving up and leaving everything on the front porch without talking to anyone. But with alcohol, I had to check their ID, which meant I would have to wait for them to come to the door. I started driving toward the address. The drive took just over 15 minutes, winding deep into the woods. Most of our town was covered in forest, so this wasn't unusual at all. But when I turned down their driveway, the path was rough and bumpy. It looked like nobody had taken care of it in years. Then I saw the house. It sat all by itself, just one very old home. No lights were on anywhere, so I could only see the front of the building from what my headlights lit up. I parked and stepped out of my car. The woods around me were completely silent. It felt like I was totally alone, with every sound I made echoing through the darkness. It was 1 in the morning though, so that made sense. I stood next to my car and opened the delivery app on my phone, getting everything ready for the ID check. While I was standing there, I spotted a light glowing somewhere out in the trees. I didn't worry about it too much, because it looked like it was probably just a light from another house. Maybe a porch light or something similar. I couldn't actually see any house though. The light was too far away and just barely visible through all the thick trees. After getting the app ready, I walked up to the front porch. I couldn't find a doorbell anywhere, so I knocked on the door. I could hear my knock bounce around inside the house, like it was completely empty. Kind of strange, but I ignored it and waited for someone to answer. Really, the only thing that seemed weird so far was that no lights were on inside the house or outside on the porch. My headlights were still the only thing letting me see anything at all. Having an older house in the woods was pretty normal around here, so I know it sounds odd, but it didn't bother me too much. After waiting for a whole minute, I finally heard something moving behind the door. A moment later, it swung open. The second the door opened, I saw just how dark it was inside. I thought there would be some dim lighting somewhere in the back, or that maybe they would turn on the lights when they came to answer. But no, it was like looking into a black hole. I could barely even make out the man standing in the doorway. He was pretty tall and skinny, and shadows covered most of his face. I told him I just needed to check his ID real quick, for the alcohol. He nodded, and I think he smiled a little, but I couldn't see very well. He said to give him a minute to find his wallet. His voice was slow and rough. The man left the door wide open as he turned around and walked down the hallway toward the back of the house, disappearing completely into the darkness, just a few feet from the doorway. Now I was getting uncomfortable. I mean, I already kind of was, but seeing this guy living in a pitch-black house was really weird. I think as the bad feelings started growing inside me, I began looking around nervously. I glanced back at my car, sitting ominously in the gravel driveway, with its headlights still on and nothing but dark woods behind it. Then I looked at the forest next to it. I saw that light again, the one I noticed earlier in the woods, but it was much closer now. I stared at it, and after a few seconds, I could tell it was moving. Not like it was shining everywhere, but it was gently swaying or shaking, like someone was standing still, holding a flashlight and pointing it right at me. A chill ran down my spine. The light had to be only 50 feet away in the trees. Everything outside was still completely quiet though. I couldn't hear anyone or anything moving around. But as I kept staring at it, I suddenly heard something from inside the house. I turned my eyes back through the doorway, peering into the darkness of the front hallway. I could hear quiet creaking on the floorboards like someone was carefully sneaking closer to the door. I jumped off the porch and ran for my car. As I did, the light in the woods moved, but I didn't look long enough to see what they were doing. I got in and sped away, still trying to catch my breath. I pulled over at the same gas station to calm down. It's funny how in situations like this, your mind tries so hard to convince you it wasn't what it seemed like. I really couldn't figure out what exactly that was, but I was too shaken up to keep working. So I went home after that and called it a night. After several days of not being able to stop thinking about it, I finally did some research. Not really to figure out what happened, but more to prove to myself that there was nothing to worry about. However, I very quickly discovered some disturbing facts. That house was abandoned. It had been empty for over 50 years, and that piece of wooded land was just vacant, or was supposed to be. There weren't even any other houses anywhere near it. I don't know what was going to happen that night, but I really feel like I barely escaped with my life. Story 2. In 2019, I drove down to my older brother's cabin to watch his dog while he was away on a trip. He was just going on a 3-day work trip and didn't want to leave his dog, Cooper, with someone the dog didn't know. I call my brother's place a cabin, but it was really a normal, pretty big house. I only called it a cabin because it was tucked away in the middle of the woods. The first day I spent hanging out and catching up with my brother before he left around 3 that afternoon. There wasn't much to do at his cabin, besides relaxing and maybe listening to music by the fireplace. After eating dinner, I thought it would be nice to sit outside and watch the sunset by a campfire. So I brought Cooper out with me, and we relaxed in the yard by the fire as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. It was really peaceful, at least for the first hour. I found out pretty quickly though that it wasn't quite as calming once the sun went down. It was actually extremely creepy. Everything around the cabin became completely dark, and the silence of the woods was just eerie. Not even 10 minutes after the sun was gone, I put out the campfire and went back inside. Maybe it just wasn't for me, but I honestly hated the scary feeling of being out there at night. I sat on the couch with Cooper and ironically turned on a horror movie. The long drive to the cabin had made me pretty tired though, and during the whole film, I kept falling in and out of sleep. However, at one point I woke up and Cooper wasn't beside me anymore. I sat up and looked around, seeing him sitting by the front door. I called his name, but as I did, I realized how strange it was. Cooper didn't look like he just happened to be hanging out there. He was sitting straight up, head forward, facing and staring directly at the front door. "Cooper, you okay, buddy?" He looked back at me, but only for a second. Then he looked back at the door. I got up and walked over to him, patting him on the side and looking out the peephole of the front door. I didn't see anything. I opened it slightly and stuck my head out. It was still too dark to see clearly, but there didn't seem to be anything out there. No sounds of any animals walking around either. I closed the door and went back to Cooper, thinking a deer or something must have walked by a few minutes early. Now is probably a good time to mention that Cooper was a young German Shepherd mix, so definitely a smart dog. I didn't doubt that he had smelled or heard something, but I figured it had to be a harmless animal wandering near the cabin. I finished the movie and went to bed not long after. In the morning I took Cooper outside and mostly just had a relaxing morning, sipping my coffee and enjoying the peaceful outdoors. I tried going for a walk, but I was nervous about going too far out, worried about getting lost in the forest, so I just stayed close to the cabin. As the sun eventually went down, I headed back inside to avoid the darkness, and did pretty much the same thing as the night before. I laid on the couch and turned on a movie. Cooper was lying with me for a while, but ended up wandering around the rest of the house to pass the time. Completely out of nowhere though, I heard his loud, deep barking coming from behind me. I jumped up and yelled his name as I rushed into the kitchen. Cooper was standing with his tail between his legs, and the hair on his back standing up, aggressively barking at seemingly nothing at all. I tried to calm him down, but even when I got him to stop barking, I couldn't keep him from continuing this low, deep growl. I had no idea what happened or what scared him. There was nothing in the kitchen at all. There was only a window above the counters, but it was too high up for Cooper to even see out of. I told Cooper it was okay, using a soft voice to hopefully settle him down. Then I led him back into the living room to sit on the couch with me. It seemed like I was just able to calm him down for a moment, before there was a sudden hollow tapping sound coming right back from the kitchen we just left. Of course, this made Cooper start barking again, but this time I didn't tell him to stop because honestly, I was pretty freaked out. I got up and went back to the kitchen. Nothing was there. The tapping I heard sounded like the hollow thump of someone tapping on the outside of a window. So naturally, I went up to the kitchen window and looked out. There really wasn't anything to see. I didn't know what to think at this point. Was it a raccoon or something, trying to find a way in? Or was it just me not being used to the sounds of being in a cabin in a forest? What worried me most was that Cooper also seemed on edge. Like if it were just normal sounds, then why was he freaking out so much? It was getting pretty late though, and I thought maybe moving to the bedroom would help us both cool off. There was a small TV in there as well, so I continued the movie and watched from bed. Cooper sat next to me, ears up and alert the entire rest of the night. It was about 11 when I turned off all the lights in the cabin and started getting ready for bed. I let Cooper sleep in the room with me, so I closed the door and filled up his water bowl, then got in the shower to wash off before bed. Even though there were a few strange things happening, I was still enjoying my time at the cabin and was looking forward to getting some sleep and waking up to enjoy my last day there. But as I was rinsing off, there were suddenly a few loud thumps against the wall, followed by Cooper barking again. I quickly turned off the water and threw on my clothes, rushing out into the room. Cooper wasn't there, and the bedroom door was now open. Cooper was smart, but opening doors seemed impossible. I could hear his barks moving further through the cabin. I ran into the hallway and down to the other end, immediately seeing the front door was wide open. I didn't even have time to think, because I saw Cooper barking and running away from the cabin into the woods. Within seconds, he was gone. I could only hear the faint sounds of his barking, getting further and further away. I grabbed a flashlight from the front closet, then sprinted after him. It felt like as soon as I was in the middle of the forest, surrounded by nothing but trees, I suddenly couldn't hear Cooper barking anymore. Once I realized that, I stood still and kind of froze up. The forest was almost completely silent, just a quiet breeze rustling the branches above me. Cooper, Cooper, Cooper. I called out for Cooper several times, yelling his name and hoping he'd leave whoever he was chasing and just come back to me. I must have been out there for an entire 5 terrifying minutes before I heard leaves rustling ahead of me. A moment later, Cooper came running toward me, his tail tucked with this look of pure fear all over his face, and I could hear quiet whimpering as he stared back at the darkness he just came from. I made sure he followed as I ran back toward the cabin and got us both inside. I called 911, then my brother, as I waited for help to arrive. Afterward, we stayed in a hotel for the night, until my brother got back the following day. Unfortunately, there wasn't much follow-up. Someone was definitely watching the cabin, likely for the multiple days I was there at least, and had somehow broken in, only to be chased away by Cooper once they got into the bedroom. What happened out there in the dark forest while Cooper was alone, I honestly don't know, but poor Cooper was apparently terrified for weeks after that. Thankfully, he seemed to recover though. That was definitely the most horrifying and intense experience of my life. And if not for Cooper chasing them away, I don't know if I'd be here right now. Being over 6 years since then, Cooper has gotten older, pushing 10 years old now. I still love getting to see him every time I visit my brother. And even though he's not my dog, I still love him and appreciate what he did for me that night at the cabin, and for keeping my brother safe from whoever is still out there. Story 3. I was heading home from a long afternoon at work. It was nearly midnight. I usually take the train into the city since it's an hour-and-a-half drive there, but I knew I'd be staying late this night, past when the trains stop running. I was really tired, both because of the long work shift, but also because it was already 2 hours past when I'd usually be in bed. Once I was out of the city and driving on the long, straight and empty country roads, it was even more tiring and hard to stay awake. I didn't feel like I was going to fall asleep, but it was almost like torture being forced to stay awake as I drove. 40 minutes passed while I continued down what felt like an endless road, not seeing more than 4 or 5 cars pass by before I caught sight of something on the side of the road. It was a pickup truck pulled off on the grassy shoulder, but no lights on or signs of anyone in or around. Kind of weird for being out in the middle of nowhere, but probably just had some car trouble or ran out of gas and had to get a ride home. I didn't think much about it until not 2 minutes later. I passed another one. It was a car this time, but almost the same situation. Parked on the grass near the trees off the side of the road, and no signs of anyone around. Had to be just a coincidence, but I'd taken this route plenty of times before and never seen anything like it. It kept me a little more awake, looking around for any other interesting things going on. I'd say another couple minutes passed. I was looking straight at the road, when suddenly something appeared in my headlights right on the pavement ahead of me. There wasn't even time to see what it was, or swerve out of the way. I immediately hit it with my right tire. I was kind of stunned for a moment from how suddenly it appeared. I kept driving, listening for any problems with my car, but hoping I just ran over it smoothly. However, just a minute later, I could tell something was wrong. I didn't even have to wait for the tire pressure symbol to light up to know it was going flat. I pulled off to the side of the road, and pretty much right away realized how much more strange this was, comparing it to the previous two cars I'd seen. The only difference was that I was still here in my car and they weren't. I put it in park and took a deep breath before getting out to look at the damage. I was so tired, I didn't even have enough energy to be angry, but just felt so disappointed and frustrated that this was happening on a night like tonight. I walked around to the side of my car and looked at the tire. There were clear scratches on the paint around the wheel, and the tire was about halfway to being completely flat. Definitely needed a tow truck and a ride home. Before getting back in my car, I couldn't help but look around at where I was, out on the side of a long empty road between towns with just trees in all directions. It felt kind of creepy being out there alone and stranded. It was just as those feelings started to creep up on me that I saw something else. Far down the road, someone was walking toward me. I couldn't see much of them obviously because it was dark, but more so because they were on the side of the road, like walking on the edge of the tree line. It kind of seemed like they were trying to stay off the road to not be seen. My first thought was that it might have been one of the people from the other cars I'd passed, but as they got closer, this uneasy feeling overcame me. I got back in the car and started calling for a tow truck. After a minute or so, the man walking was getting close, just about to pass by before they left the tree line and started making their way through the grass and up to the road. They came right up to the side of my car. I watched them as they approached my window. They didn't say anything, but they were noticeably jittery, and I don't know, unstable I guess. It was very hard to read them, or figure out what they were doing. After a few seconds though, his eyes locked onto mine. His stare was incredibly disturbing, and instantly made me feel like I needed to get out of there. I put my car in drive and drove away. I knew I risked damaging my wheel, but my gut told me that something was really wrong with that guy. I made it just 20 seconds down the road before passing another car. This one was different though. Its door was partially open and the inside lights were on. It looked like it must have been where the guy came walking from. I kept going. At the nearest town, I pulled over and got help with my car. I thought it was honestly just a really strange experience, and would never really know what that guy wanted or what even happened. After everything was fixed, I'd mostly forgotten about it. That was until 4 days later. I heard about a disturbing story of two people going missing along the road that I often took to and from work. I immediately thought about the two abandoned cars I'd seen that one night and quickly looked more into it. My body went numb when I saw it was on the same exact night, and those two cars belonged to the two missing people. Both cars had damage to their tires from hitting something in the road, likely put there by someone to purposely get them stranded. I called police to give them information, but as of today, neither of the missing people have been found yet. As far as I know, there hasn't even been a single clue or lead as to who was behind it or what they did to them. It still haunts me to think about how close I was to being the third missing person.